Hello, today I'm going to show you my reel-to-reel collection, and specifically of empty reels, going through the different brand names. It's one of the things that I enjoy doing in addition to building up a library of tapes for audio use, is to actually collect together the different brand names. And I thought we'd start with Agfa. This is a typical Agfa metal reel. You'll notice that it's called Agfa Gevaert or Gevaert. And that is because this company is a fusion of two, a Belgian company called Gevaert and a West German company called Agfa. There was an East German counterpart, and we'll come to that in another episode. So today we're just going to look principally at Western, that is West European and American brands. So that's the first one. Now we go over to the plastic one. This is one of the more beautiful reels, I think, and that is another Agfa Gevaert reel-to-reel. These are all 7-inch, by the way, until we get to the smaller size. The only disadvantage with this is that there are no places to insert the tape, which means that you've got to be fairly deft in holding the tape down while you're threading it in. The next one is a fairly common one, and those of you who are into reel-to-reels will be familiar with this slightly blue tinted one. There's also an untinted one, which I prefer better, actually. This is you will find quite commonly used. So those are the Agfa ones. I think I may have some other ones. I'm just going to see if I can locate them. Yes, here's another one from an earlier time. This is a 5.5 inch reel, 5 3/4 inch reel rather, and it follows the standard design of the tapes of that particular era. BASF, Phillips and others all use this, but it has one little difference, and that is you'll see the little notches there. Had me baffled for a while until I realized that they were actually for a special plastic device for holding tape in place, so that it didn't wander all over the place. Now, I did have another one somewhere, but I can't currently locate it. Oh, here it is. Here is another one. That's actually the same kind, but a slightly more modern one. You'll notice it's two colours, blue and reddy orange. Orange is for side one, and blue is for side two. That saved them having to mark the reels. I think that's okay. You'll notice that there are no notches in this later one. I think people found it rather cumbersome. They tended to get broken off rather too easily. So there is my Agfa collection. That is the West German one. We're now going to take a look at Ampex, and I have a fairly large stack of these. Ampex is an American company, unlike Agfa, which I said was a German-Belgian conglomeration. There are many kinds. I don't have these in any particular order, so we'll start just randomly. This is one of my favorite designs. I think it is extremely attractive. It doesn't have one of these long slits going into the hub for the threading of tape, so you've got to be, again, fairly deft, but it's got a slit along the side for that purpose. There is another one. You'll notice that this one is actually slightly less transparent than this one. This one has a sort of frosting effect. I'm not sure which I prefer. I tend to like the transparent ones myself rather than the opaque ones. We now come to another design which I like a lot. At least I like the transparent design one. The opaque ones I am less keen on. There's the grey one, which I think is rather ugly, and there's another one there without the frosting in the middle. Now, this particular design is probably one of the most common designs that you'll find, because companies which were selling off leftover tape, the big companies, would use these, and they were used by many, many different companies, and so they're fairly common. Likewise, there's the black version, which I prefer to the grey one, I have to say. So those are those. I have a slightly smaller opaque one, a 5 3/4 inch as well. don't think we have any others. Yes, I've shown you that one already. So that is Ampex. Next we come to another German company. This is BASF. The B represents Baden in southwest Germany, from the state of Baden-Württemberg. A very, very common design indeed. Very common in the 60s in particular. I think I may have a smaller version of that somewhere. No, apparently not. There were also a number of coloured versions of this. Here's a green one. I'm not too keen on all these fancy coloured ones. It's a trend these days amongst enthusiasts and collectors to go for coloured ones. I guess this is all right. The only reason I kept this one is because I got a few tapes which have this green coloration. And then the more modern one, which is very, very familiar to those who used BASF tapes in the 70s. There are more modern versions of it as well, with a black logo in the center. I don't like that so much. I don't have any empty reels with that on at the moment. So that's BASF. Next, we are coming to another well-known company. They did produce really good quality tapes, and that is Maxell. I don't have too many of these, probably because I don't live in the United States, but these are a couple of examples of the translucent ones. This one is one with a slightly frosted variety. Well, they're quite attractive. I don't mind them at all. They're rather like the Scotch reels, which you'll see in just a minute. So that was Maxell. Next, the Dutch company of Phillips. And whilst I'm very fond of the reels, I don't like their tape very much, I have to say. But this was the very first tape that I was exposed to when I was a boy and fell in love with reel-to-reel machines. And here is a typical Phillips reel of the 60s, and there is a 5 3/4 inch one. Then it modernized into a very posh type of reel, and they are also quite common. You'll find those around in the 70s and the 80s quite a bit. There's a 5 3/4 inch, and there is a 5 inch. Phillips. Again, that's my introduction to reel, so I have a sort of sentimental attraction to those reels. Next one is one of my favourites, and that is Scotch, which is an American company, otherwise known as 3M. You will have come across these, I'm sure, under different labels, like in sellotape, for example. Some of the earliest ones look like this. Some of them had this gold embossing. Some of them were just simply plain. A very, very well-known mark indeed. Very, very successful. They did not bother, except on one occasion, with labels or stickers in the centre, and I'm glad they didn't do that. It wasn't necessary. It is such an elegant design. There are a number of variations. Firstly, this one came out, which I rather like, I have to say. There is a white version of this, which I don't like. I do not like opaque tape reels at all. But this, I think, is extremely attractive, and I've got one or two tapes of that as well. This one I absolutely loathe. Now, there are other people who are a bit surprised about that. There are two reasons. Firstly, I think the tape quality is awful. Every single one of them that I've bought has got sticky shed syndrome, so the tapes have been completely useless. And I don't like the fact that they're opaque. You can't see through them, so you don't know what's going on inside. Particularly if something goes wrong, it's hard to poke the tape out. This was actually made by an Italian subsidiary in Europe. So for those of you who live in Europe, this is probably the Scotch tape that you will be the most familiar with. Now, Scotch did make a number of varieties, including this dark one, which is semi-opaque. Not bad, I guess, but again, it hasn't got the thread, easy threading for the tape. Unlike, by the way, one good thing about this is the design for the threading is extremely good. It doesn't matter what angle you approach the reel with, it threads incredibly easily. So I have to give full marks for that. And then this very strange one. I call it strange because I don't know how to actually thread the tape. Maybe there is a technique, I don't know what it is. It's completely solid. You can't access inside to feed the tape in. I don't know how to do it. Lovely looking reel. I love the ones which are completely transparent and solid like this. But unless there's a way to actually feed the tape in, I think they are, to all intents and purposes, pretty useless. Again, I am probably ignorant. I don't know how it actually works in real life. Next, we come to Sony, who made a Japanese company who made some really good tape recorders, designed some really nice reels, but made awful tape. I have never come across a reel of Sony tape which I thought was any good. This particular design is iconic. They used to come with Sony tape recorders. I think it's very beautiful. I have one which I use on one of my machines as a take-up reel all the time. Very, very nice indeed. And it's also extremely easy to thread. A couple more which are similar to each other. They are, as you can see, tinted black. Again, you've got to be fairly deft in your ability to thread. You've got to put your finger in there. There is no way of threading through the solid reel itself. This is a similar one. The only reason that I've kept this, in addition to this one, is because the internal construction is a little bit different. You can see it's a lattice structure inside, which is not the case here. So that is Sony. Now this is a new one I only came across quite recently. It does rather look like Scotch, doesn't it? But it's not marked. The only marking on it is the real number. I think there is actually a manufacturer's name on it, but it's back to front, and I'm not too good at reading. Yes, it's made in Norway. It is a Norwegian design, not Tandberg. It's fairly solid. It's, I find it a fairly attractive kind of reel. Let's go to the next one, which is Tfunen. I don't know quite what to say about this one. I think it had great potential. In many ways, it reminds me of the Phillips reel. Perhaps it was inspired by it, or maybe Phillips was inspired by Tfunen. I like it, but I don't like this bit. I do not like writing on reels myself. Most of the old reels came with labels attached to them. The ones in the 60s. You're supposed to write the contents of your tape. There's not much space, and I think it's rather ugly. If they'd left that out, this wedge here, I think it would have been one of the most beautiful tapes. As you can see, it's serrated at the top here. Tfunen, a German company. In fact, it was the Tfunen company of Germany which invented the reel-to-reel machine. I don't quite know what to make of this, whether I like it or not. As you can see, it's shaped like a four-leaf clover, and it's Irish tape. No, it's not made in Ireland or the Irish Republic or Northern Ireland. It's a United States brand. I don't know. I think it's too much on here myself. I don't like too much stuff. Let's see what it says at the bottom. Made by Radio Industries, Inc. I think it's made in Atlanta. I'm not sure. Maybe it's Alaska. I can't tell. Fancy reel. They were around. Quite a few of these were around in the 60s and the 70s. Now we come to a German-Swiss company, and that is UHA. You've seen this design already. Very practical, like the early Phillips ones. Let me show you one. Or an Agfa one. They all look fairly simple. It's almost a generic reel. Yes, there is the Phillips one. I suspect it was Phillips originally. I do not know the history of the reels and who designed what. So UHA, which is a German-Swiss company. And I have one new tape recorder. Now this one is extremely rare indeed. It is made by a Danish manufacturer called Bang & Olufsen, who made hi-fi equipment. When I was young, a friend of mine had a Bang & Olufsen set tape recorder resembling somewhat the Norwegian Tandberg, which I say is one of the best machines ever, I believe. These reels are extremely rare. They didn't make tape. This was a take-up reel that came with their new machines. So I was quite surprised to come across this. So a Danish reel, Bang & Olufsen. Next we come to Maxell. There seems to be another one here that has accidentally been duplicated, but I do think it's actually a slightly different design. Yes, it's tinted for one thing, and the internal part of the hub is also a little bit differently constructed. So yet another Maxell. And now an American company, again. Not my favourite design, I have to say, but I guess it appeals to the aesthetic taste of some. And this one is called Radio Shack, and they made fairly cheapish tapes. Interesting design reel. As you can see, it's transparent but tinted. Next, we come to a reel that I only discovered really in the last month, and I think, I'm not 100% sure, that this is a Danish one. It might not be. It may simply have been distributed by the Danes. There are no markings on it at all. I call it a combo reel because that was the name of the tapes which this particular reel came from. Attractive. Rather like the Phillips, BAS, early BAS, and so on. And now to a few miscellaneous ones just to round off. This one is a generic reel, no name on it. It had leftover tape from other companies. I think it was called International, the people who use these reels. Perhaps other people use them as well. And then finally, a 7-inch reel which can only hold up to 5 3/4 inches of tape. I think it's rather attractive. Its hub's rather bulky. These were principally used when recorded tape was sold, which did not have vast amounts of tape that they wanted stored, and people preferred using a 7-inch reel because it gave better balance to the more sophisticated machines. I actually transferred quite a few of my 5 3/4 inch tapes to these because I think they're quite attractive. One of the problems is that it's slightly indented in the center here where it's supposedly held by the tape recorder. So unless it's one of these flat machines, it won't stay. It wobbles and wriggles unless you've got one of these suction caps which you can place on the top to hold it in place. I haven't got any yet. I would love to have some more of these. So I think that's probably all that I'm going to say today. Let's call that part one. So these are some of my different reels. I hope you enjoyed that. I shall come with some more another time.